be sober and to be part of a worldwide solution to what was trying to kill me, and I didn't even know it. By the grace of God and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, my sobriety date is March the 10th of 2005. My been-around date is March the 23rd of 1994, and that doesn't have to be anyone's story. As my story will disclose, everything I needed was in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and what I lacked was willingness. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor who has a sponsor, and I sponsor women who go through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then they turn and sponsor women who go through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then they reach out the hand to help the next struggling alcoholic, because that's the chain of recovery that Alcoholics Anonymous handed to me when I came here, and I finally surrendered to the program that, once again, has saved my life. And that sounds so dramatic, but it is so true. I would be remiss, and I always think about this, and then I forget to say anything. I cannot stress enough how amazing it is to not just find friends and a tribe that understands who I am and what I am, but through the process of sponsoring another, walking shoulder to shoulder. You know, the sponsor is never mentioned in the big book. It's one alcoholic helping another, sitting across a coffee table and saying, this is what I was like, this is what happened, and this is what I'm like now as a result of taking these steps. But the joy of the women and the men that God has placed in my life, I would not trade that for anything in the world, ever. And I'm really grateful the state convention is in town this weekend, because this is much more manageable than the big room. I'm really grateful. I am one of 4 children, and I am the only alcoholic of those 4 kids. And for many years, my story has changed as my sobriety has grown and as I've gotten deeper into the book and had more revealed. I used to say many things about my father, and including labeling him something that he never claimed for himself. What I know is that I was raised in a family with a mother who loved us so much, but she had parents that came straight off the boat from Germany, and there was no affection. And it was her way, don't question it. And oh, by the way, if he's home, go hide, because you didn't know what was going to happen. There was a lot of alcohol involved in his trips. He was a truck driver, and when he was home, it was either a lot of laughter because he was 6 beers in, or it was a lot of, you better go run and hide because he was a case of beer in. And you just didn't know what was going to happen. And I learned at a really, really young age to walk into a room and dip my toe in and try to decide, who do I need to be so that he won't yell, she won't cry, and everything will go smoothly. That is not what makes me an alcoholic. Things unfolded in my childhood. That is not what makes me an alcoholic. Things happened to me as a young girl from the ages of 3 to 11 that should never happen to any child. My older brother, still perfection, multiple college degrees, never did anything wrong. He was a steadfast, everybody can depend on him. I have an older sister who was born 4 years before I was, and that was back when she was born. She was labeled mentally retarded. My parents were told to sterilize her and put her in a home. Then I came along 4 years later, and then there's a baby behind me 7 years later. And my mother fought to keep my sister at home, and she was literally on the forefront of special education in the state of Texas in the 60s, because she wanted her child to have an education, and that didn't exist for kids that were born like my sister. What I know today, that was an inkling that I may be an alcoholic one day, is I resented the hell out of her. My mother for caring for my sister, and for my sister for needing that much attention. What about me? What about me? I need this. I need that. And, I'm not proud of it. I saw through a child's eyes, and I reacted through a child's eyes. And I would go to school and act like I wasn't related to her. I did some things as a child that I know were coping mechanisms. But I was so jealous. I was so jealous of her because it seemed, and remember, I suffer from a twisted thinking, and I also have an appalling lack of perception, as Bill Wilson says. And I had that appalling lack of perception as a very small child. And what I saw was, I don't count. They love her more. So I started acting out from a young age. When I hit high school and I discovered alcohol, the game was on. And, that's not what makes me an alcoholic either. I drank more than my peers. I think I loved it more than my peers. What started to happen for me from the ages of 14 to about 17 is the things that had mattered in my life, making good grades, getting good attendance at school, excelling in the choir because I loved to sing. None of that mattered. What mattered was, where are we going to go Friday night after the football game, or preferably during the football game? Let's have something to drink then. And I started this double life. I'd act one way at school and another way as soon as I was out on the roads with all my friends and I was drinking. And I always looked older, so I was the designated go in and buy the alcohol, which what that means, there's an unwritten law. If you can buy it, then you get to drink the majority of it. And I didn't know that my huge capacity for alcohol meant, I can hang and you guys can't. What I know today is that I was drinking alcoholically at the age of 16, 17, 18. And consequences started happening in my life very early on. My parents moved back to Texas the year I graduated from high school. By this time I was raised in Oklahoma City. And I didn't want to do anything except go to work, earn a little money so I could go out on a Friday night, which then became a Saturday night, which then became ladies' night on Sunday, and then it was Monday, and then 7 nights a week. That was my life, and I loved every single moment of it. I saw nothing wrong with it. I saw nothing wrong with, I don't have enough money to put food on the table or to pay my part of the rent or the utility bills, but I can go to the bar and I can go to the nightclubs, and I love the nightclubs. Oh my God, I am a child of the 70s. I love disco, I love country western, I love to be out there drinking and dancing, and I was walking a really fine line between having a normal life and the life of nothing but just somebody that hangs out in smoky old bar rooms. And I drank my way out of about every job I ever had, except for TG&Y. I don't know if you guys had TG&Y. I was drinking during those years, but I really liked working there because you could buy on credit. And so from about the age of 14 to the year I graduated from high school, I worked at TG&Y, and I kept that job. I probably shouldn't have. But when I made it out into the world, I drank my way out of college, and when I made it out in the world, I was in oil and gas. And boy, do those people know how to drink. I found my tribe by that time, and this was the early 80s. And it was show up to work, go to lunch, have a few Bloody Marys or whatever cocktail everybody else is having, go back to work, maybe, leave early toward the end of the day and go to the bar, and then talk oil and gas all night. And this alcoholic then had to go home and throw up the alcohol she'd been drinking for 6 hours so I could go to the nightclubs because I need to go dance. And that was my life. That was my late teens, early 20s, all the way until about the age of 25, 26. And I started losing more and more jobs. And it's the most amazing thing. Do you know if you are really good at your job, but you never show up, or when you're there, you're in the bathroom because you're so sick, you may get asked to leave, and that happened repeatedly. There would be a layoff in the oil industry, and I was always the first to go. And, that just fueled resentment, because look at me, I'm so good. So I drank my way out of every job. That last one that I had in Oklahoma City, they moved us to Houston, Texas in 1986. And I'm hanging on by a thread. What I know is that part of my thinking, I'm already planning a geographical, because I had what they call it's a DWI here, it was a DUI in Oklahoma. I had a plea bargain down to driving left of center, but I had been arrested for drunk driving. And I had every excuse. It was not really, I did not drink that much, not near as much as I normally drink. I was messing with my contact and I swerved over the line. That's what happened. And that's the story I told myself for many years. There was a breathalyzer. I was over the limit. I was drunk. I went to jail for that. But that was before the laws became so intense as they should be, and I was able to, I skated free on that one. There were no repercussions other than money that I didn't have spent on a lawyer that, basically just showed up and said a few things. And for years I would say, well, I never had any legal consequences because I just blocked that right out. That didn't really happen, because I live in denial and delusion. Another one of the symptoms of an alcoholic. So 1986 comes, I'm being moved to Oklahoma. I knew that something needed to change because I started having the shakes every morning. Sometimes I had the shakes while I was drinking. And what I know is I had alcoholic poisoning. I had alcohol poisoning. I was hungover in the mornings. My method to deal with my day was to drink a half a beer, to get that down, to calm the shakes so I could go to the scotch or the bourbon that I really wanted so that I could slug it and get to work and do as little as possible until I could get back to the bar. When I moved to Houston, I had no idea it was so expensive to live here, even though all the research had been done. And I moved in over here off of Champions Drive, and I found very shortly after that I loved Houston, but I found the nightlife here as well, and I couldn't afford to do both, pay my bills and the nightlife, so I needed a second job. And I wasn't familiar enough with Houston to try and find any place really classy, because, I'm a classy broad in my own mind, to work. So I found a smoky old pool room off of I-45 and West Road, and I graced them with my presence. I remember thinking that. I am doing them a favor by coming here and asking for a job. I remember thinking that. So I got the job, and I became a bartender, and that is the best job I've ever had. I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved the fact that I could go in, that you could order a drink, you could tell me your problems, I would pour you a drink, I'd pour me a drink, you'd buy me a drink, I'd drink your drink, and then when you weren't looking, I'd drink another drink. And at the end of the night, I may or may not have balanced the drawer out. It didn't matter because I'm having a good time. And for any of you that were unfortunately enough to be out on the roads at 2 a.m. on any given night from like 1987 to 1989, I'm sorry if I was a danger to you, because I know I drove drunk repeatedly in a blackout during those years, because I would close that bar down, I'd sit and I'd try to balance the drawer, and I'd be drinking the whole time. And I eventually, when I sobered up, I went back before that bar went out of business and made my amends, because there were many times that I was drinking the top shelf scotch and couldn't account for, I obviously wasn't selling it to people, so I had to have some kind of story, and I had really slippery fingers. I kept breaking the scotch when in fact I was consuming it, and I got to make my amends to the man who owned that bar. I have no idea exactly how many bottles of top shelf scotch I drank, but what I know is I was able to go back in sobriety and say to him, this is what really happened. And he said, I know. He knew it all along. And I don't know if he just felt sorry for me, or he was hoping somebody else would take me off his hands, and guess what they did? I met him, he came in the bar, he asked me if I was married. I said no, and he said, you want to go on a date? And I said yes, and 2 weeks later we're engaged, and 5 months later we're married, and he has since told the story and will say anytime you ask him about it, he didn't know if I was going to actually show up at the altar, because I kept saying, well, maybe not. I never really wanted to be married. Are you sure this is what you want to do? But I felt this push. I've got to do something different. This nightlife is starting to wear on me. And we share in a general way, but what I will tell you is from the age of 14 to when I met him at almost 28 years of age, there were innumerable, I don't know who they were, where I met them, or how I ended up with them. A long laundry list. And I was not raised to be that girl. That is not the home I was raised in, but I know today that's who I am under the lash of alcohol. And so I met him, and we had this whirlwind romance. We're married, and my thought process was, now I'll slow down. Now I won't drink like I used to drink. I have somebody to kind of monitor it for me. And he'll be my designated driver if I happen to overshoot the mark. The problem was that I always overshot the mark. And what happened is we would go to work, we'd meet at the bar after work, and then he'd drive home because I always was in a blackout. I could not drink. And I didn't know that that's what made me an alcoholic. I thought I was having a good time. And I so wish I could just make everybody laugh with all the funny things I did. But the longer I stay sober, the more I see there was a lot of bizarre things that happened, but they weren't very funny. I was driven by alcohol to continue lowering my standards, my ethics, and my morals, and make one more compromise on my belief system, and I didn't even know it. So we're married. 2 years later, I'm pregnant, and this was when I knew to my core that there was a problem. I never had wanted to be married, but I always wanted to be a mother. And the day I found out I was pregnant, my very first thought was not, oh, thank you, God. My first thought was, oh, I'm not going to be able to drink. What have I done? How am I going to do this? And I tried. I tried so hard. I tried to white knuckle it and cold turkey it and not drink. And I did it for 3 months, the first trimester. And then I drank every day of the rest of that pregnancy and begged a God I did not believe in, had any place for me in his, could not love me, did not want to love me because of the things I'd done, to please don't let my child be born with fetal alcohol syndrome. Night after night, the same prayer, night after night, the same glass in hand, night after night, the same terror, and all I knew to do was to pour alcohol on top of it. He was born early, he was born normal, a little yellow, a little looked like Yoda. And I thanked God that that baby was healthy, and I was going to be a good mom to him, and now I'm going to stop drinking. And instead, it was like a whole new level. I don't know how to be a mom. I woke up in a house that we'd purchased that didn't even have a dishwasher and don't remember, signing on the dotted line. How am I supposed to raise a kid? I was terrified of everything in my life. And that terror and anxiety was alcoholism. I had anxiety, alcohol-induced anxiety about everything in my life. When Will, who back then was Shelby, was 2 years old, I had a night of extensive drinking. Who knows why? Because I drink. I was sicker than a dog. I woke up the next day, and the family that I've been raised in, there was a God of my mother's understanding, and a God that was, we were beat over the head with it, and I wanted to be good enough to be loved by that God, and I just couldn't make the mark. So at one point I made the decision, I think I was about 14, after that first drink of alcohol that I loved so much, that I won't bother him if he doesn't bother me. But I was guilt-ridden by the life I was leading. But I continued going. I had a church family that I attended, and I called my pastor, and I told him, I said, minor understatement, I think I drink too much, is what I said. And he said, I don't know anything about alcoholism, but I have a brother who's an alcoholic, and he went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and they saved his life. And so I did, but I was remorseful enough, shameful enough, and enough pain that this is before the internet. They had a thing called directory assistance. You could call 411 and ask for, I need Alcoholics Anonymous, and they connected me with Houston Intergroup. And Houston Intergroup, Alcoholics Anonymous Intergroup, connected me with the Champions Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. And some very kind man listened to me pour out how miserable my life was, and how maybe sometimes I drank too much, but if only he, she, they, and it would change, then maybe I wouldn't drink so much. And he said, we have a meeting at 4 o'clock, can you be here? And I said, not today, but I'll be there tomorrow, because I had to go get my hair done, I had to go to the tanning bed, I needed to get nails, and I needed a new outfit. So, I showed up at Champions Group at a 4 o'clock meeting. That was March the 23rd of 1994, and you guys were there. The same sign was over the door, keep coming back. And I heard the solution to what was wrong with me, that I have an illness that is threefold, that it is body, that it is spirit, and that it is mind. I heard the solution, and it was offered to me in every sense. And I went for 364 days, and then I had enough AA in my head that I know that I can drink successfully. I know that sake is not really alcohol, and if you eat sushi with it, you won't get drunk. And 3 days later, I woke up in the floor of the closet in our bedroom with our 2-year-old son, 2-year-old son. By now, it's almost 95, so he's almost 3. I think I found Mommy, Daddy. And I'm in my own puke, and in my own pee, and I am demoralized to the core of my being. And my husband, long-suffering, loved me enough that when I looked him in the eye after I'd washed up a little bit, bloodshot eyes, shaken, because I have alcohol poisoning, I said, I told you I was an alcoholic. Which he knew that. I've been going to meetings for 364 days, every day. I lived at Champions. I told you I was an alcoholic. They told me that I'm not. I don't have to go to those meetings anymore. This is after a 3-day pass out in the closet, and he loved me enough to say, okay, honey, I'll help you with this. So he now became, he's going to help me regulate my drinking. And I freely handed over that designation to this man to help me not get drunk. And I hated him every moment of every day, and I did everything I could to circumvent him, letting me have 2 drinks a night, and I would go to the neighbors, and I'd go to the liquor store, and I'd sneak around behind his back, and he couldn't understand if he only gave me 2 drinks, how come I'm passed out on the floor? I could not surrender to the idea that I was an alcoholic. I'm going to fast forward through the drunk-a-log. What I'm going to tell you is that there are people sitting in this room and rooms all over the world of Alcoholics Anonymous who came in and got 1 coin. 1 white chip or 1 desire chip, and they never had to drink again. That 364 days, what it did is it told me that there is a solution. And I learned a little bit of what was needed. But I hadn't had a psychic change because I hadn't done the work. I kept looking at what you did, and then I parroted the tables. And so when I drank again, after almost a year, the disease of alcoholism, it didn't stop back here. It had continued going. And when I poured the alcohol back into my body, it took off. And for the next 11 years, you guys kept lovingly handing me desire chips when I would come in and say, I'm done, I don't ever want to feel this way again, I'm done, I won't drink anymore, please help me, I don't want to drink anymore. And I'd stay a little while, and then I'd feel better. And I could not surrender to the idea that I couldn't beat alcoholism. I was going to be the one that was different. Okay, maybe I'm an alcoholic, but I bet there's a way I can do this successfully. And I couldn't. I just couldn't. And so 10 detox centers later, rehab centers, detox centers, a couple of trips out of the house in a straitjacket in the back of an ambulance, a 6 to 9 month court ordered away from home because the SWAT team had stormed the house, because I like to call people when I'm drunk, and I called the wrong person, and I said the wrong thing, and I deserved to have the SWAT team storm the house. I was court ordered away from our son. I got to visit with him only with a representative of CPS. And my child, the only child I have, learned that, what are we going to do this weekend, Dad? Are we going to rehab to see Mom? That was part of his life. That was our family dynamic. The last time I went to, and I learned something. You don't always have to go to detox when you get drunk. You can come to Alcoholics Anonymous and get a desire chip and do the work. But I had to be separated from my home and the environment because I couldn't crawl out of the bottle long enough to hear the solution. And so I was in the Way Out Women's Center in 2003 for the second time. And I heard a man that had just gotten out of jail who'd been hearing the message of Alcoholics Anonymous in prison because he killed somebody drunk driving. And I was sitting there thinking, oh, thank God that's not me. Could have been. I drove in a blackout. I'm judging him from my lofty position of detox. And he's talking about how there are those of us that become institutionalized, that we don't know how to live without being locked away. And I thought, oh, those poor, sorry people, that's so sad. And it was as if a light bulb was turned on. That's me. This is the 10th time I've been away from home and called a sponsor, because I went through a legion of sponsors who gave me the very best of what they had, their experience, strength, and hope. And I was refusing to surrender to what was suggested. And I would call them and say, I'm in XYZ, this is the answer to my problems, I'm going to get sober, this is the answer. And I was told the last 3 times, no, Becky, the answer is in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Come and stay. Don't just keep coming back, come and stay. And I will be forever grateful that when I came back into the rooms on March the 10th of 2005, some of the same faces that had been there in 1994 were sitting at the table. There was a gentleman at Champions who has never minced words, and I'm grateful for that. He is honest, and he is truthful, and he is passionate about this program. And he said, what are you going to do different? Are you done? And I spoke the truth, which I hadn't been doing in the rooms of AA. And I said, I don't know, but I want to be. Please help me. And Julie B., who was one of the last women I hadn't worn out, came up to me and said, I'm your sponsor. Our literature says we approach the newcomer. It doesn't say we sit and wait for the newcomer to come and say, will you sponsor me? Because they don't know what a sponsor is. it says, we approach the newcomer. I wasn't a newcomer. I was a retread. I used to introduce myself as, I'm Becky, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a chronic relapser. And she said, quit saying that about yourself. What you think about yourself and say about yourself is important. I am Becky and I'm an alcoholic. Not a real alcoholic, although I am. I'm just another bozo on the bus. And Julie came and she sat down with me and she bought me a brand new 4th edition of the Big Book, and I had a resentment against that because only the 3rd edition is good. Now, I couldn't stay sober, but I knew my editions. And we had a brand new edition of the Big Book and a brand new highlighter, and word by word, page by page, line by line, she took me through the first 164 pages and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, the fellowship alone will not keep me sober. The fellowship is amazing, and it feeds my soul. The steps alone will not keep me sober. What they do is they help me to uncover, discover, and discard, and find out who I am, what I am, and what the solution is. I had to find a power greater than myself that I could rely on, and I had been resistant to that as well, because my old ideas about who God was, or who HP was blocking me from seeing the light in your eyes and the solution in these rooms. And what happened for me, for this alcoholic, is that when I came back, and you so lovingly had saved my seat for me, I finally was willing to listen like only the dying can, because I was dying. And I was willing to hear that maybe, just maybe, I'd been wrong about this czar of the heavens, this creator of the universe, this almighty power, and that I could find one, just like Ebby Thatcher told Bill Wilson, choose a God of your own understanding. So I started to borrow some of your God, and some of your God, and some of your God, and the hours started. You know, I could not drink. I couldn't. And slowly the days started to add up, and I'd had a year 3 times before in those 11 years. You know, you can stay dry in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was dry. I wasn't sober. I was dry. For 3 different times, I picked up a year coin by a wing and a prayer without ever having done a 4-step. I cheated myself, I cheated my family, and I cheated my recovery. I was so afraid of telling the truth on a 4-step to myself and then to another human being that I kept tripping over myself and getting drunk again. I finally told the truth, and what I got was love, compassion, and understanding. And I heard a whole lot of you, I did that too, and I thought I was the only one, that I was the worst of the worst, which is part of that grandiosity that is very alcoholic thinking. By telling the truth and trusting that information with the God of my understanding and another human being, the 5th step promises on page 75, I could look the world in the eye. I could be at one with my fellows. My life started to change, and when I was coming up on a year in 2006, which would be the 4th time I'd come up on a year, I'd had a psychic change because of the result of these steps, and because I'd finally found a God I could rely on. Not one I had to hide from, but one I could not just say, hi, I'm Becky, I'm an alcoholic, and I have a God of my understanding. I had a relationship with a power greater than myself. And I don't know what yours looks like. I don't know who you rely on to stay sober. What I know I found in these rooms was a loving entity that no matter what, I'll always be loved. I'll always be protected and cared for, one day at a time, but I have to build a relationship. And a relationship means, you know, if I want to be friends with Shannon, I need to pick up the phone and call Shannon. If I say I love Shannon, I need to have some concern for her life and invest in that relationship. And I had to do that with the God of my understanding. I'm so grateful that I got to live and come back and stay and find that God, because my life began to change, and it wasn't overnight. You know, the Big Book also says that there is a long period of reconstruction that lies ahead. And that's not just talking about the physical, mental well-being of the alcoholic. That's talking about the family. And when I sobered up, my son was 12, and he had heard nothing but lies for 12 years of his life. He couldn't believe a word I said. He hated me. He didn't want to be in the same room with me. He would look at me with disdain. He did everything but outright deny that I was his mother, and he may have done that too. That period of reconstruction, I cannot fix that. I cannot undo the damage that I did. I can't undo the damage that I did in my relationship with my husband or the neighbors in general, because I was that tornado roaring through other people's lives. But the God of my understanding assured me that he could, because he was big enough. And that was my experience. Relationships started to be repaired. When I was 3 years sober, I always kept going to retreats because I love alcoholics. I love you guys, and I wanted to just have you rub off on me. And that does happen to a certain extent. But I got to go to a retreat, a conference down in Corpus, and I had a spiritual experience listening to a woman who came to the podium, and I can't remember how old she was. I think she was close to 80, but she had her hair all up in a big poof, and she had on a mini skirt, and she came and she told this amazing story of life and death and victory and staying sober one day at a time and losing children and staying sober and losing relatives and staying sober. And her husband had died that day, and she kept her commitment. And she stood at the podium and she said, "Did you know that Alcoholics Anonymous has a national anthem?" Brenda, I think you were there. And there was like 500 people in this room, and we're all like, "Oh, I didn't know that. Did you know that?" And she starts singing to the tune of "Oh Christmas Tree." The song, "Oh Christmas Tree." She starts singing, "Oh, thank you, God. Oh, thank you, God. Oh, thank you, God. Oh, thank you, God." And pretty soon the whole entire room of 500 alcoholics holding hands are singing this song, because the grateful alcoholic will not drink again. Will not drink again. If I find something, anything to start being grateful for and build on that. And there was a shift that happened then, and it's continued to happen. In the last 15 years, we lost our home to foreclosure. How does that happen when you're sober? Well, if you don't take care of your money situation and you get on a certain adjustable rate mortgage and you can't pay it, they take your house. I didn't have to get drunk behind that. If Hurricane Harvey comes tomorrow, that's 8 years ago. If Hurricane Harvey comes and takes everything you own, you don't have to get drunk behind it. You get to come to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous with rubber boots on and hairy legs because you can't shave your legs, and sit with the other people in the room who are thanking God that we're sober no matter what. In 2019, my mother, who'd been praying since 1972, because you guys, I am old. Since 1972, she'd been praying, "Dear God, please don't let Becky drink any more alcohol." God had repaired that relationship by 2019 when she was 92 years old. And I was able to be a daughter and a sister to my sisters and go to San Antonio and sit at her bedside and give her baths and talk to her and ask her about when she served during the Korean War in a MASH unit. They really served in MASH units. And she was stationed in Japan. She had these fascinating, amazing stories that I'd never bothered to ask her because I needed to drink and run as far from that family as I could. And God repaired that relationship so that I could be there with her and support my family. And because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I lost my fear of public speaking. They asked me to give her eulogy. The problem child, the fighter that had to be put out for so many years, you guys repaired those relationships. My God, in this program, so that I could be there when my mom passed away. That same year, Mom died in March it was the next year, I'm sorry. No, it was that year. Mom died in March of 2019. April of 2019, my mother-in-law moved in with us. I had hated that woman. She had raised my son while I was drunken and detox, and I thought she was trying to steal him from me because I have an appalling lack of perception. She was suiting up and showing up and caring for my son when I couldn't, and I resented her for it until I did the work, as outlined in the steps, and saw that she was being a loving, kind, amazing grandmother to her grandson. And she loved me. And she would say, every time I went off the road, went off the rails and got drunk again, she'd say, "Why don't you just go back to those nice people at AA, Becky? You do so good when you're with them." She didn't understand alcoholism. She didn't want to know anything about alcoholism, but she knew you guys made a difference. And I got to be with her when she went from this world to the next. And that was on March the 10th of 2023. March the 10th is my sobriety date. And I'm so grateful that I got to be there and be the daughter-in-law that she needed all those years, and that she got her freedom on my freedom date, and I'd been resentful of her for so long, and I had made my amends. And those 4 years that she lived with us were not easy, but our relationship was restored better than it had ever been. I'm so grateful for that. So very grateful. Today, that sister that's I was so resentful of and so jealous of when I was a child, Mary Beth. She's 72 years old. They said she wouldn't live out of her teens. She's an end-stage kidney failure with dementia, and I get to go every other week. And that's why I'm not here very much, because I'm sober, because you guys gave me a life back. I get to go and be of service to my sister, my baby sister, that I left out the long litany of things I hated about her, you know, because she was the baby. God restored that relationship. It didn't exist before AA. It didn't exist until our mother got sick, because even though I had been sober for almost 12 years when Mother died, my sister didn't trust me, and I wasn't welcome in her home very often. But because you guys taught me how to suit up and show up and say I was going to be there and then actually do it, my baby sister's my best friend today. That's a miracle, an absolute miracle. And she trusts me to come and care for her home and our sister so that she can get a break. And I get to be of service to Mary Beth, who is so dear. She used to be the storehouse of our family memories, and now that's gone. And I get to make memories with her and remind her. And on a good day, she loves to watch black and white Andy Griffith shows and, you know, all the old shows from the 50s and 60s. And on a good day, when she's watching those shows, there'll be, you know, a light will come on and she can talk about, remember when? And it's such a gift. I'm sober and I get to be there today because you guys taught me how to be a sister and a daughter and a mother and a wife. My husband and I just celebrated 35 years of marriage in May, on May the 5th. And it hasn't always been easy because I don't know how to be a wife, a mother, or a friend. But you guys taught me. There were women in the rooms who said, you will go home and you will cook dinner. And you will do it with joy. I'm a terrible cook, but I did it anyway. You will go home and not hide in AA. You got sober so you could be back in your family again. Carol Armstrong, her picture's not up on the wall, but the last probably 5 years that she was my sponsor before she passed away, we had an ongoing litany of what we're going to do this year different to reintegrate back in the family, because I spent so many years running. And I don't regret the years I spent in the rooms trying to get well, but I got well so that I could be back with my family and I could be an employee and I could be just a common man out on the street. Thank you, Alcoholics Anonymous, for restoring my life. I don't know how long I've talked. What has happened also, you know, you guys all remember there was a little thing that happened about 5 years ago where the world shut down, and as a result of that, some online meetings sprung up, and that the timing couldn't have been more perfect. I was caring for my mother-in-law. I was going to San Antonio. I did what you guys taught me to do, what I've always done since I finally got here and stayed here, was I jumped in the middle. I took on a service commitment. I chaired meetings. I suited up. I showed up. I started a big book study with God's help, and so we grow. And so we grow, and I took on commitments in other time zones. I have sponsees in other time zones today. So on Saturdays, I get to spend the day doing step work with people in other areas, because the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, it doesn't know time zones, and it doesn't know borders, and it doesn't know geography. It knows one alcoholic, the language of the heart, talking to another one. It's one of the greatest gifts in my life. I'm so grateful for that. And what that taught me, too, is that I have to be in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. Whether it's an online meeting, sitting on a chair, carrying the message, going to detox centers, whatever that looks like, I owe my life and my sanity to Alcoholics Anonymous. I do. And so that's continued to grow, and it's the most beautiful gift. And I get to work, for the last 15 years, I got to work around teenagers, but I get to be right in the middle of teenagers today and see the hurt that I know I was walking around with, and know that I don't have to say anything about I'm an alcoholic. Just try to be a channel of God's peace. And it's one of the greatest gifts of my life. And I have to be at work at 6 a.m. That was not my wish list, but I'm so grateful that I get to do that today. And as a result of that, you know, the healing that continues to happen in my family. I was thinking about page 62 of the Big Book earlier. I was thinking about there are 13 forms of self on page 62 of the Big Book. And every single bit of my drunkalogue, what I was like, not what it was like. It was just the world happening. I was running from reality, in full flight from reality, living in delusion and illusion, and staying intoxicated. Those 13 different forms of self, my story is riddled with the selfishness. What's in this for me? What do you mean? I'm not hurting anybody by drinking. Now I'm drinking at home. I can see so clearly today, with God's help and the guidance of a sponsor, how those, on how page 62, which is a description of, it's right before the third step prayer. It's where I finally surrender who I am and what I am to that power that you guys gave me that I found in the rooms of AA. The selfishness, the self-centeredness, the self-absorption, the self-aggradation, the self. Without the steps and without turning to a God of my understanding, I'm stuck and I'm mired in that. And I did not see that. I can't see what I can't see. Herb K talks about that. I can't know what I don't know until I'm ready to see it. And I believe today every drop of alcohol that I drank was necessary to bring me to a point of surrender to go, please help me, I'll do anything. And anything wasn't as hard as I thought it was. Anything meant parking myself in a chair, asking for help, and doing what's suggested. In the story in the big book, A Vision for You, it talks about where are we going to find these people? The conviviality, where are we going to find this amazing fellowship? We are everywhere. And I just said this in a meeting the other day. Before the pandemic, Intergroup had listed 2,500 meetings at Alcoholics Anonymous a week in Houston, Texas. 2,500. Then the pandemic hit, and it dwindled. And it's starting to grow again. We're not back up to that number, but that's a lot of recovery. That's a lot of solution, and that's a lot of help everywhere. And I'm so grateful for that because, if it's the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, not my message. I want what you guys poured into my life that came directly from the pages of the big book, written by Bill Wilson in the first 100 and Dr. Bob. I want that solution to be there for my son, and that's been part of the journey too. I knew he was one of us, and he may be. He hasn't said, but he was this last year, it's been a year now, it was a year in June, he was diagnosed with mental illness. I didn't see that one coming. And you know what? I don't have to drink over it. What I get to do is I get to ask another woman in AA, what do I do about this? How do I be of service? And we have a sister program that teaches me how to detach and let his journey be his, and that I'm the only example of recovery that my family sees, and that's what's required of me to continue to live this life and this program one day at a time. There is an amazing, I just want to leave you with this because I've seen it before and it speaks to my heart. Alcoholics Anonymous and recovery, not just, I could get sober eventually. I could put the plug in the jug. I could not leave it there. I could dry out. That's what all of those detox centers and rehabs did, is they dried me out. They wrung me out and got the alcohol out of me, and I was left with the ick. I was left with the hatred and the resentment and the fear and the anxiety, and I don't know how to live life. And the 12 steps started to show me a different way to live and how to be in this world with my fellows. It's a period not just of reconstruction, it's a period of deconstruction so that I can be of maximum service to God and my fellows, whatever that looks like, on a daily basis. And I don't do it perfectly, but I can tell you that today, I haven't thought about a drink in a long time. I wonder why people order margaritas with a beer in it, but I don't want one. What is that? It's expensive, I know that, because I saw the bill on one of them. I'm not tempted anymore by the lure of, I know what would work. You know what would work? Is some meditation and calling another alcoholic and hitting my knees in prayer and going to the big book and calling my sponsor and saying, this is what I just thought. And then she gets to say, boy, are you way off base. Have you prayed yet? This period of reconstruction to me today looks like this. Imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps, you can understand what he is doing. He is getting the drains right and stopping the leaks in the roof and so on. You knew that those jobs needed doing, and so you're not surprised. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably. You see, he is building quite a different house from the one you thought of. You thought you were being made into a decent little cottage. He is building a palace. He intends to come and live in it himself. And that's what happened with this alcoholic. My God is within me. That's who I tap into, but I can't hear him when I'm all alone. I have to be with you guys. I have to hear you tell me your experience, strength, and hope, and how you walked through the hard stuff, so that I know that I can do it too. And I'll be forever grateful that keep coming back. You know, we don't shoot our wounded. If there is anyone new to Alcoholics Anonymous in this room and you're struggling, or if you're sitting here and you're feeling like, is this all there is? You know, the biggest disservice and danger to coming in and out, in and out, in and out, and that is my story, is that I thought Alcoholics Anonymous didn't work. That was the lie I told myself. The truth is, AA, you are 100% guaranteed to stay sober. 100% success rate if you do the work as suggested and take the steps. I was around the rooms. I was not in AA. And I'm so grateful I finally joined and came into AA because you saved my life, and I am forever grateful to be sober and to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Becky. Let's thank Becky one more time. Yeah, in March when I saw Becky put her name on the birthday board, I was like, holy crap, another person whose birthday is March 10th. Because mine was March 10th to 2025, and she's the only other person I've seen who's March 10th. But anyways, all right, so in Alcoholics Anonymous, we give out chips to recognize milestones. Get it off this annoying stand thing. We give out chips to recognize milestones in our sobriety. The first chip is if you want to give up the high cost of low living and try staying sober for the next 24 hours. Any takers? Trade a wet one for a dry one. Anyone got 1 month of continuous sobriety? 2, 1? Hell yeah. 2 months, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, heavy freaking metal, 10, 11, 18 months, anyone celebrating a birthday in August? Alright, and once again, if we could get a couple hands to help put the club back together after we close out, that would be awesome. Cool, let's close. Sorry, it's only my second time chairing this thing.
You're doing great, Troy.
Oh, shit.